word from the book of Jeremiah, chapter number 52, verses 17 to 19. But before we read, I must say, and I must admit, that Rev, you've got a very powerful praise team. And like I asked the other day, whether these truly are your members or whether they are from SDA, because these guys are very powerful. You know, the problems we're having in our churches today, we have mechanical worship. And Paul invited us to do our worship with a purpose. And I will admit, you guys are blessed. Na musichoke, tuendelee kufanya kazi ya Mungu. When I came here, we interacted with a few of us here. Wanakibe, we met somewhere. The chairman, we met. DG, the treasurer, we met. Because I visited Ref some few days ago. We had a cup of tea. We share, you know, ministers and pastors don't have friends. We are friends to each other. So I'm happy that he's chosen to be my friend and my brother. So Reverend Harun is not a colleague. He's a friend. He's a brother. We share in private, in public, because he's a brother. I'm also glad that the leadership of this church extended the invite. And tumejaribu kupanga kidogo, tukapangua. But we're happy that leo ndo ile siku. So I will want to read with us Jeremiah 52, verses number 17 to 19. Let me read. The bronze pillars that were in the house of the Lord, and the cuts, and the bronze sea that were in the house of the Lord, the Chaldeans broke in pieces and carried all their bronze to Babylon. They also took away the pots, the shovels, the trimmers, the bowls, the spoons, and all the bronze utensils with which the priests ministered. The basins, the fire pans, the bowls, the pots, the lampstand, the spoons, and the cups, whatever was solid gold and whatever was solid silver, the captain of the guard took away. So my theme for today is recovering the stolen vessels, the temple. When mama yetu alikuwa anaombea kanisa, I was like, did she look at my sermon? Because that is exactly what I wanted to do. I want to talk about a church. And I want to explain to us the glory of the temple. And I want us to understand by the end of this sermon that this is just a building, that you are the church, and I'm the church. And I will want to ask you to help me remind your neighbor that he or she is the temple we are about to discuss. I want to suggest to us that from the text, because I do not want to do exposition, I want to be very brief. The glory of the temple of Jerusalem was something to behold, because we were reminded that the temple had gold, it had silver, it had bronze, and it had wooden vessels in it. And we must understand and appreciate that every vessel in the temple was kept for its special purpose. You know, what made the temple to be the temple? What made the temple to be great? What made the temple to be admired was not the design of the building. It wasn't the design. It wasn't the program. What made the temple to be what it was: glorified, exalted, respected. It was the vessels in the temple. And because we have agreed that I am a church and you are a church, I want you to help me to ask your neighbor, how is your temple? Are the vessels in your temple intact? Then there comes a gentleman called Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. And these guys came and destroyed the temple and rooted every vessel in the temple. The temple was rendered desolate and empty because of the absence of the temple, of the vessels. Possibly, it remained to be a temple. The name wasn't removed. It remained a temple. PCA Njoro Church, PCA, that is PCA Njoro, AIC Njoro, or whatever denomination. The name remained that this is a temple. But because Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians destroyed the vessels in the temple, we are reminded that the temple remained desolate and empty. It remained to be called a temple. But I want to suggest to us, the temple became so useless. Why? Because in absence of the vessels, there was nothing. There was no spiritual function that would have been undertaken in the temple in the absence of the vessels. So it became useless. How is your temple? How is your temple? Is it desolate? Is it empty? Is it useless? How is our temple? Inasmuch as the church is under attack, inasmuch as we are faced by challenges, we must assess ourselves. How is our temple? How is our temple? I want to suggest to us all this morning that the temple referred to in the text we read represents our hearts. Because we were told our bodies are the temples of the Lord. So, the temple we are referring to in the text we read represents our hearts, where Christ resides. That is the temple. The vessels in the temple represent that which are in our hearts. What is it that is in your heart? Because that is the vessel we must guard. And I always tell people, I was born and brought up in a Muslim family. And I will tell you this story when I get time, one time. I was born a Muslim. For those of you who may have seen me walk around, I limp. Some people think that me bounce. But I will explain to you one day why I limp. See your style? There is a reason why I limp. And I always tell people, there are few things I will guard. There are things I will protect. One, I told people, I'm saved. See, I'm a pastor. But I told people, and I always remind them, I will protect my family strongly. Na mtu akicross laini hiyo, tunakosana kidogo. Number two, I always tell people, I protect my church. The Presbyterian Church, the Church of Christ. And I tell people, I protect my faith. I protect my faith. So we must make a decision. Now that we've understood the temple that is addressed in the book of Jeremiah is our hearts. And the vessels that were destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians are those things that are in our heart. Number three, Nebuchadnezzar represents the devil who comes to raid and plunder our hearts so that we are left powerless and empty. Watu wa Mungu, when the temple was vandalized, when the temple and the vessels in the temple were destroyed, the temple became useless. There was shame in the temple. And immediately the temple was destroyed. It is said that the presence of the Lord left the temple. And this is exactly what will happen to us, to our hearts, once the vessels is vandalized by the devil. And I want us to be sincere before God this morning. I want us to be sincere before God and point out to Him seemingly simple vessels that have been destroyed by the devil in this church. We must be honest and sincere to God. This is a building. We are the church. And you are the pastor and the priest in the church. You know the vessels that has been vandalized by the devil in this temple. We must be honest before God and tell Him and point out to Him that, Lord, this temple is not in good shape. The devil has destroyed the vessels in the temple. Lord, I want you to recover the stolen vessels in these temples. Because until that time, we ask God to recover the stolen and the destroyed vessels. The temple will be ashamed. It will be powerless. It will be desolate and empty. Itabaki kuitwa hekalu, but the temple cannot undertake any spiritual function because it is a useless temple. How is your temple? Ask your friend. How is your temple? Because until that time, these vessels are recovered. The temple will remain desolate, empty. I want to suggest to us the lost vessels in the churches, including this temple, and that temple, and the other temple, the other temple. The vessel of love. The first church in the book of Acts chapter 2 verse 42-47, if you read, the church in the book of Acts was not a perfect church. It's a church that came much longer after the relationship of man and God was already destroyed. So it was not a perfect church. There was corruption, there was persecution, there was immorality, there was all sorts of vices in that church. But you read the church in Acts chapter 2, it was a strong church. Despite the fact that it's a church that came long after the relationship between man and God has been destroyed, the Bible tells us that the fellowship in the church grew. You read from 42 to 47, the number of members grew up to the end of verses 47. Why? Because we are told these guys waliumega mkate pamoja, wakasoma Biblia pamoja, na wakatambua shida za watu wao. You know, a church that can identify the challenges and the problems of their members. But the current temple is destroyed. I would rather die with my problem than share with my neighbor who is a Christian, a praise and worship member, my neighbor who is my elder or my pastor, because there is no love in the church. The vessel of love in the church is destroyed. So the church is in ruin. We gather every Sunday. We gather during the weekdays. A congregation of people who don't love each other. We must ask God, please, Lord, recover the vessel of love back to this temple, because I need it. If you are the kind of a person who wish bad to another, if you are the kind of a person who cause pain to another person. If you are the kind of people who injure the reputation of another person, if you are the kind of a person who dismisses the genuine tears of other people, then your vessel of love is lost. Tell your friend, then your temple is in problem. Ask your friend, is the vessel of love intact in this temple? That we are in church. Sometimes we ask God, why is it that there is no breakthrough? There is no breakthrough in this fellowship. No. It is not that God is not here. It is because the temple is in ruin. And where the temple is destroyed, the presence of God lives immediately. That is why you will never experience the goodness of the Lord in the fellowship. He left a long time ago. Because the temple, the vessel of love in the temple is destroyed. It's destroyed. We must ask God, watu wa Mungu, that the Lord restore for us the vessel of love in this temple. Because we need it. Number 2, the vessel of trustworthiness. If the vessel of trustworthiness is lost or is destroyed and vandalized, then you find yourself clothed with excuses and reason to cover your wrong and evil acts. Mungu anafahamu. Mungu atafahamu. Those are the excuses we give. The justification we give when we do evil, that God understands. Mzee anafahamu. Unfortunately, mambo mengi maovu mabaya hayapangwi nje ya compound ya makanisa. Many bad things happen here. And the problem is not this church. It is not this building. It has a good structure. This is not the problem. You can change your denomination 100 times. Go to Shakaola if you want. But I will want to remind you this day, until and unless that time, the vessels in these temples are restored, your temple will remain empty, desolate, and the presence of God will leave this temple. We must ask God, please restore the vessels. This church. Because once the vessel of trustworthiness is lost and destroyed, what happens? You lose your friends. Marafiki wanakuondokea pole. You lose your family members. And the worst of all, you will lose your salvation. Why? Because of the desolate state of your temple. We must not be Christians. We must not be Sunday saints. We must be Christians from January to January. Usiku na mchana. We must be trusted. I don't know whether it happens here. Where I come from, Marsabit, hata wakati wa kuhesabu sadaka tunachunga wale wameokoka. Because you cannot be even trusted na hiyo pesa ambayo imeombewa. That is what it is. Watu wa Mungu. One day, a gentleman, he tithes. So he brings 30,000, 50. I don't know whether it happens here, but kwingine wanatangaza Jumapili sadaka ya Sunday hiyo, ambayo ni mzuri lakini pia ni tafukuza watu kwa kanisa. So jamaa, the first Sunday, the 30,000 he gave is not announced. The second Sunday, the 50,000 he gave in tithe is not announced. The third Sunday, he gave 100,000. He doesn't indicate his name. It wasn't announced. Then he came to the pastor and said, Rev, mimi kuna kitu nataka kukuambia. I've been tithing. I gave 30 last Sunday, 50, and then 100. Unfortunately, I don't know whether it was omission or it wasn't announced. So I told him, no, it's a deliberate omission. Because I wanted to protect wokovu. So I said, after the service, then I will be in the vestry to count. So wakati wa mahesabu, I popped in. I told them, leteni bag zenu. Easy, what do we call it? Easy, yenu ya kina mama. What do we call it? Handbags. Then I was like, should we make an announcement that these guys should not come with the handbags to the vestry? So wakati tulitafuta, sadly, one of our very senior deacons, saved person, ile ushuda anatoa Jumapili, inakufikisha mbinguni na inakurudisha hapa. Sadly, unfortunately, because the vessel of trustworthiness was destroyed in that temple, we found the 50,000 he gave that Sunday in the handbag. How is your temple? Possibly you have a youth pastor here, I don't know. Will you be trusted with those young girls and young men? Will you be trusted with those kids? Will God trust us with anything? Once the vessel of trustworthiness is lost, the temple becomes desolate. There is nothing you cannot do. You can kill. You can steal. You can do anything and still justify your evil. Why? Because the temple is useless. The presence of God has left the temple long ago. Number 3, the vessel of kindness. Once this vessel is destroyed, you become very harsh and very rude. Very rude. And when people avoid you, when people keep away from you, you complain. Or you mistake, when people avoid you, you think that these guys avoid you because they respect you. No. They are not avoiding you because they respect you. No, they don't respect you. You don't hold any respect. These guys are avoiding you because they are avoiding a problem. They are avoiding a problem. They have lost you. Kindness is a very important vessel in our temples, which we cannot afford to lose. Ask God to recover the temple, the vessel of kindness. We have Christians who are blessed. They are blessed. God has blessed us. Na baraka ya kanisa ni triangle. There is God up here. Kuna watu wa Mungu hapa na washiriki pande hii. There are people who are blessed. Just because maybe they don't agree with me, they're like, no, I will not tithe and I will not give. For heaven's sake, you are not giving to me. You are giving to God. You are not doing it because of Him. No. You are doing it because it's part of your worship. We are Christians where we neighbor our fellow Christians from the same congregation, the same fellowship, but then these guys sleep hungry. We have plenty. In the morning, tunamwaga tu akiona. Then you come to church in the morning. Wewe ndo unaongoza praise. You've had your ndoma and guashe and everything in the morning. For heaven's sake, this neighbor has not eaten for 2 weeks. Wewe umekuwa ukitupa na ukimwaga. Because the vessel of kindness has left. It's destroyed. Then you take 2 hours in praise. For heaven's sake, I do not have even the strength to praise. How is your temple? Is the vessel of kindness destroyed? We must be kind people. We must be kind. The vessel of peace. When the vessel of peace is stolen, you will never see the goodness of the Lord. You will never. And I was telling people the story of Spafford. Spafford, there are few things that happened to him. He was a Christian, a lawyer, an elder, an evangelist. But there are things that happened to his life. The first thing we are told from history is the Chicago fire of, I think, 1881. The Chicago fire that destroyed everything Spafford had. Destroyed his businesses, everything. The second thing that happened to Spafford was when he lost his only son at 4 years. The love of a parent to the kids, the only son, died of fever. So it was a very trying moment for Spafford. Then he discussed with the wife, Anne, and they agreed, this thing is too much. Can we take a leave kidogo? Tutoke, tupumzike. And because D.L. Moody is having a mission somewhere, why can't we join him so that we relax our mind? So on the day that they were to travel through Atlantic, Spafford had a commitment. So he asked the wife and the kids, the 4 girls, please allow me remain behind. I will join you in a few. So they agreed, wakaenda. Then after some few days, he received a telegram that said, survived alone. What happened? There was a tragic crash in the middle of Atlantic that killed 226 people, including the 4 daughters of Spafford. And because the vessel of peace in the temple of Spafford was intact, possibly as a man, he felt the pain of losing his kids. But the peace that was in the temple kept him. So after a few days, he took a boat through Atlantic to meet with the wife Anne on the other side. When he got to where the 4 daughters crashed, Spafford saw the goodness of the Lord in the darkest moment of his life. He sang and said, when peace, like a river, attended my way. When sadness, like sea billows roll. Whatever my lot, the Lord has taught me to say, it is. Why? The vessel of peace in the temple is intact. In the next service, I will be preaching to you about the storms in life and that they are inevitable. So, in as much as we are Christians, we will experience storms in life. What will help us keep the momentum, keep faith, keeping on, is the peace in the temple. Once you lose the vessel of peace, you will never see the goodness of the Lord. We've got to ask God to restore the vessel of peace. So if you've got no peace, you complain, you fight, you cause others, you accuse others. Hata kanisani. You hear problems in the churches. Hekalu iko na shida. And immediately you lose the vessel of peace, you are disconnected with God. Completely disconnected with God. So, it's our prayer that the Lord will restore the vessels. I'm running short of time. I will finish. Because if I finish today, you will not invite me again. So I must make this disclaimer that there are a few points I have not exhausted. So that Rev will invite me again here. But importantly, I want to challenge us that we must guard our vessels jealously. Jealously. Guard the vessels in the temple. Do not allow the devil. And I want to suggest to you the devil may not be very far. He's always not very far. The devil is around. He's around. It's not very far. So guard your vessels jealously. Because without the vessels, the temple is powerless. You will praise, you will preach, you will pray. Nothing will happen. There is no miracle. People will go to Shakaola. The problem is not the leaderships of the church. The problem is not pastors or elders. The problem is your temple. Sort the problem in the temple. Because if these vessels are destroyed, we will do all this we are doing. We will make projects. We will design churches. We will do all these things. There is no miracle. There is no salvation that will happen. Hakuna uponyaji. Because the temple is desolate. The power of the Lord left the temple the day the vessels were destroyed. If you want God to restore revival, if you want God to restore that which was stolen, if you want your Christianity to make sense, if you want the power of the altar to speak for you in the temple, ask God, restore the vessels that are destroyed. And I want to tell you, because you are in charge of those temples, you know the vessels that are destroyed. Ask Him, pour your heart. Ask Him, Lord, please restore. It's my prayer that the Lord will help us regain the glory of our temples. Let's pray. Lord Almighty, we want to thank you again. Thank you for reminding us that we are the temple. Thank you for reminding us, dear Lord, that there are very important vessels in the temple, and that the vessels are what makes the temple powerful, what makes the temple what it is. We want to admit, Lord, that truly our temple are in ruin. It's destroyed. It's vandalized. There is a problem, Lord. We want to graciously ask you, with honesty and sincerity, Lord, please help us to regain the glory of the temple. If in this congregation there is any temple that is empty and desolate, because the devil has vandalized the important vessels in the temple, it is our prayer this morning, Lord, that you will restore our stolen and destroyed and vandalized vessels. This is our humble prayer. In Jesus' name. Amen.